Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Can you see the morning in my face?
Mourning. Good to see you, Bill. Happy, belated 4th of July, Independence Day. Did you guys? I saw something on Twitter today. I don't know if this is real or not, but it was like someone doing fireworks on their own, and it like ignited their car nearby, and it was. I hope everyone survived, but it was amazing. You got to be careful with those fireworks, Bill.
My grandfather lost several fingers from fireworks when he was a kid. There was like a day when I didn't really notice, and then one day it was like he's gonna tell me, he was like, "You see my hand, and there's like 3 fingers there," and I'm like, "Okay, what's the trick? what's the trick?" He's like, "No, I really don't have these fingers."
It's a great old guy move.
Yeah,
to do that. We had a guy when I grew up. There was a guy named I don't know what his real name was. I grew up in a real rural area, and there was a guy that we just called Jumpin' Jack, and it was apparently because he had cut off multiple fingers on different occasions, and he would jump around when he did it. And one day, my mom, who was a transplant, moved into the area and caught him Jumpin' Jack to his face, and he had never heard that before. But we did it, Bill. We went over to a friend's house this year in West Virginia. Fireworks are ubiquitous. There are you can just stop anywhere and buy fireworks, and I'm talking about heavy duty stuff. And we went over to a friend of my wife's house, and her whole family was there. The kids are in the pool, and then at 9:09 or whatever, everybody had chipped in money, and they had their own fireworks display, and some of it was pretty professional, but I mean, it could get a little dicey. I'm glad I would, and I was sitting there next to the mom, the mom and her son, who's now an adult, but he is in charge of the pyrotechnics display, and she's totally just relaxed, enjoying the fireworks. And I asked her, are you tense at all watching this? Like I'm a little tense, and it's not my son who's in charge of this whole thing, but they had it timed to music and everything. It was Lee Greenwood's "God Bless the USA." I mean, Bill, you should have been here, man.
Well, in Massachusetts, you got to cross the state line to get fireworks. You can't get them in the state. You got to get
New Hampshire. New Hampshire.
Right? I mean, not that I do it, but New Hampshire is where you would go. Where we are, I don't know how common this is nationwide, but a lot of communities will host fireworks off holiday because you'll spend less money on the fireworks service.
Yeah.
If you do it on a different day. So we have Family Fourth in late June, which is a lovely event. My daughter got to do a 4-minute hot air balloon ride, and there was cover band and food trucks and whatnot. Quality fireworks display. And then in Northampton on the 4th, it's become tradition to have an outdoor immigration naturalization ceremony.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is very well attended on the right in the downtown. So we went
that's
to that.
Great. I'd love to do something very nice. Like that. In Europe they do it like at New Year's. That's their big thing. They have fireworks. Not obviously they don't have the 4th of July, but they tend to do it in the winter. Have you seen these drones now that are doing it instead of fireworks? I guess it's safer because of wildfires in California and places like that.
Sorry, I got distracted. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm talking about these drones that are in lieu of fireworks, people are now doing these drone displays, and it's not the same, but it's pretty impressive. And I guess it's less of a fire risk. So,
well, I mean, as much as I don't want to see people's fingers blown off, but it's not fireworks.
No, it's not the same. It's not bombs bursting in air. Before we move on, Bill, we have not talked pop culture in a while, and I've just recently started doing a deep dive into some old movies that I'd missed. One is called Night of the Hunter, that apparently is considered a great sort of film noir from 1955, I think. And then I finally saw Sunset Boulevard, which I think is from the early 1950s. These old black and white movies that are really just really great, and I don't know how I didn't see them. And then I just rewatched The Talented Mr. Ripley, which is another very good movie. Star-studded cast. Bill, what have you been engaged
Boy,
with?
because I can't go past 1981. The older films I can't get my the pacing doesn't work for me. I'm sure it's the same way like my kids look at the 80s films, like the pacing's all wrong and
It took me, I think part of the reason I didn't see these movies is it took me to get to this age and this level of, no offense, Bill, this level of maturity. Maybe I've calmed down. Maybe I'm more patient. But I don't think I would have appreciated these movies, even though I'm a big fan of like the Andy Griffith Show, especially the black and white episodes, which are superior. But it's from the early 1960s. But I'm now exposing my kids to this and having them watch it with me here and there. So who knows? But I don't think I could have enjoyed it 10 years ago, even.
I have been able to show movies to my younger daughter more easily than my older daughter. My older daughter wants to watch shows. She's not as impressed by a movie. My younger daughter, I can almost get her to see any movie because it's a movie.
Yeah.
A movie's a specialty to do, so let's watch a movie. And she doesn't always like them, but she liked The Little Shop of Horrors.
I've never seen it, Bill. Would you believe that?
Really?
Never saw it. I mean, I've seen a lot of like references to it in TV shows and stuff, but never seen the whole. It's Rick Moranis, right?
Rick Moranis, Steve Martin, Bill Murray.
Wow. Never sat down and watched the whole thing. It's funny the gaps that we have, right?
Well, I've never seen Top Gun. I still refuse to see Top Gun.
So it's funny. So I have a tradition, Bill, that as I was driving my kids to the pool the other day, on the 4th, I played Johnny Cash's Song of the Patriot, Johnny Cash's old Ragged Flag, I forget what it's called, Toby Keith's Courtesy of the Red, White, and Blue, Coming to America by Neil Diamond. I think Waylon Jennings has
Mike Dukakis' song.
What's that?
Mike Dukakis' song, Neil Diamond's
Yeah, that
America.
was his theme. Yeah, 1988, right? His theme song.
Yeah. You should play. You should add to your mix. Spinal Tap's America.
Oh, I don't even know if I know that. Is that in the movie?
It's in the movie. Yeah,
it's in the movie. I don't remember that one. I remember Big Bottoms.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was like a big part of the movie, but it is in the movie.
I need to I've seen Spinal Tap 100 times, but I haven't seen it in the last decade. I need to revisit.
Talk of a sequel.
I need to show my kids. Didn't one of the guys?
That was what I did. I showed, because they always ask me, "What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite movie?" Like, I don't have a single favorite movie. I'll give you like a top 10, And so I mentioned Spinal Tap, and they're like, "What's that?" And I showed it to them for 2 minutes, and like they just can't connect with it at all. Like the idea of a fake documentary about a heavy metal band, like there's just so many references that are just outside of their framework that it just doesn't work.
There's too many steps to get to it,
Yeah.
I think first, it's not worth it, but you would have to first expose them to 80s heavy metal before you could show them somebody making fun or satirizing 80s heavy metal.
Although I don't even think Spinal Tap, they're making more fun of 70s heavy metal than 80s heavy metal.
True.
They're not really a glam, they're not Poison,
Well, I mean, I was thinking like early 80s heavy, like,
Yeah, it's like a Def Leppard, perhaps.
Yeah. But, classic film. I just learned that Dana Carvey is in that. The scene with Billy Crystal
briefly.
as a mime? I listened to Dana Carvey and David Spade's podcast, and Dana Carvey just said he was in it. I'd forgotten or didn't know that.
But I'm curious how they're going to do the sequel. I just feel like, now the idea of a fake documentary has been done many, many times.
Even like The Office, or Parks and Rec were tapping into that. Yeah.
And the subtlety of Spinal Tap, I don't think you can do now. I mean, The Office and Parks and Rec are not subtle fake documentary forms. You could, like, the jokes are just sort of barely under the surface in many cases with Spinal Tap, and I just don't even know if you could hit that mark now for if people really appreciate it, because you have to sit and watch.
Yeah.
You have to actually sit and watch and pay attention. It's not like
Well,
short little.
it was always a cult classic, though. So I think if you did it
Mhm.
with the assumption that it's gonna just it's not gonna be mainstream. But I guess maybe the goal is that this time it would be a blockbuster. That people
Mhm.
would go see it. Like there'd be a lot of nostalgia, and people would go see it. And so maybe they have to go a little more mainstream. This goes to 11.
Um, I know, Matt. You always want to avoid talking business. You never want to get to work.
Well, last week I felt like there was zero foreplay. Or last time we did this, last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever, I think we just jumped right into it. So I thought, maybe today we would not do that, but maybe the time has come. It's a little slow. I mean, there's obviously the horrific, another horrific shooting. I feel like we could say that every few weeks now, sadly. But because of the holiday, otherwise, I think things are a little slow. But where do you want to start, Bill?
Well, I mean, I don't feel like things are slow.
Well, like, for
Um,
example, the hearings. There weren't any hearings and January 6th hearings this week because Congress is out
True.
of session.
I mean, it's maybe that my headspace is not your headspace. I mean, I still feel like we are, at least I am, trying to gauge the repercussions from the Dobbs decision. Uh, and I did a deep dive at the Washington Monthly about I was sort of a two-pronged piece. One is an admonition to Democrats: why are you fighting with each other? But you could be fighting these Republicans who are actually banning abortion. You can talk about filibuster and court packing if you want to, but abortion actually being banned by
Yeah.
these people, these governors, these attorney generals, these state legislatures, you really could be, and they're on the ballot this
Well, I mean,
November.
Bill, you raised a point last week before Biden said that he wanted to suspend the filibuster to, um, ensconce Roe into law, to codify Roe. And when Biden said that, this didn't become a big story, I think, for some. I'm not sure why, but remember, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema had been under a lot of scrutiny and attack from the activist left. Sinema was followed into a bathroom. Joe Manchin had people, I think, at a garage and on his houseboat, sort of harassing him, protesters and whatnot. And Biden, in a sense, set them up again. When don't you think that was like maybe an unintended consequence of Biden, is that he has now thrown Manchin and Sinema under the bus, and basically they are now to blame for a woman not having the right to choose,
Well, I don't.
instead of blaming
So
Republicans, by the way.
I would not singularly blame Biden here. I mean, this is tail wagging the dog. Um, you have this instinctual push. I mean, you have two things going on. One is just a broad level of outrage amongst Democrats, which automatically comes with a urgency to do something. What are you going to do? Uh, and then you have a smaller faction of people who are predisposed to chastising Democrats for not doing enough, not fighting hard enough. Your AOCs, Cori Bush, um, they look for opportunities to say Democrats are falling short. And that's not just people in office, but certain activist types like Brian Fallon, who's at Demand Justice. He had a tweet that went out sort of chronicling here are all the ways that Democrats are failing us, and so you have this pressure put on the Washington Democrats to both do something legislatively and to do something via the executive branch to prove they're doing all they can when they're not in a great position to do something. For there to be legislation to codify the basics of Roe, you need 60 votes, which they don't have, or you need 50 to abolish the
Right.
filibuster and pass something, which they don't have. And if they had 50 to do that and they passed that law,
Right.
in all
Okay, but
likelihood, it would get overturned by the Supreme Court. Then you need 50 to then pack the court to overturn that. All things which they don't have, and they know they
okay,
don't
but
have.
but the one thing, okay, you could normally blame Republicans, but once Biden says we should get rid of the filibuster to do this, then there are two people to blame. They cannot do that. Why can't they do that? Joe Manchin and Sinema, right? So by invoking the filibuster as the solution to this, Biden therefore creates the enemy. The new enemy is now Manchin and Sinema. Now, this didn't take off, actually. This has not become much of a narrative. But I think that Biden was really playing with fire. I mean, he is really setting up Manchin and Sinema to be to blame for not codifying Roe, because Democrats could do it if they have 50 Democrats. If all 50 of them agree, they could do it. And
Well,
yet they can't.
it's more complicated, and I think more treacherous for Democrats, because it's not just that Manchin and Sinema are going to be the recipient of a lot of anger from Democratic base voters. And Manchin and Sinema are on the ballot in 2024. They're used to the seat. They're not crying in their beer over it, most likely. But you are creating a narrative that Democrats aren't doing all they can because of these two. But that narrative doesn't end there, because you have AOC and Warren.
Let me just say this real quick, Bill, because I know you have a lot more points to make and they're all valid. But I just want to remind everybody, Joe Manchin was ready to do, at least the story goes, that Manchin was going to do Build Back Better, that he had some sort of a compromise deal hashed out with Joe Biden, that they were going to have some sort of compromise.
I'm sorry. I know we're Zencasting and we can't edit, but I apologize. I don't have.
But then how are we going to go to them?
Then you're going to have to wait.
This is why you come here, folks.
So I can get money.
The authenticity.
I just don't physically have it on me right now.
The real life. Bill Scher. Let's go in. Let's go in for a closer look. Oh, he's back. Okay. So before they interrupted you, I interrupted you, and I'll just pick up where I interrupted. Remember, I just want to put this in full context, Bill, for those who may not remember. Joe Manchin and Joe Biden had apparently hashed out some sort of a compromise deal to do something on Build Back Better. And the White House offended Joe Manchin by including his name in some press release that he didn't want included in there because he didn't want any more heat from the activist left. And then Manchin got mad and walked away from the deal, right? So now Joe Biden's doing it again. That's the point I'm making. So Joe Biden desperately needs Joe Manchin to do anything. To pass any legislation, he needs Joe Manchin. And he is screwing him over yet again. That's amazing to me that he would do that to Manchin again.
But yet, and I think Biden and Schumer and Pelosi are inclined to do that so they can say, look, we're fighting, we're pushing, we want to do this. And if we're short two, then give us two more senators on election day and we'll do it. But you have AOC and Warren and others saying, Joe Biden, you could be doing things yourself that you are not doing. You could be putting abortion clinics on federal properties in red states or on tribal lands. And don't worry about that Hyde Amendment, because the Hyde Amendment is you could interpret that to mean only the direct payment of abortions, not building the building. Or you're going to make a profit off of it, so it's not going to be a net loss of money. All things which I'm pretty sure this Supreme Court is not going to accept as interpretations. And Biden is clearly more reluctant to push the boundaries of what the law says, and put other people in the crosshairs of that law. So you have people saying, don't pat Biden on the back because he wants to carve out the filibuster for this. There's things he's doing that he's not doing. So you have this, and Nancy Pelosi, she points to the Senate to pass the filibuster. But what does she do? She reads a poem and sings "God Bless America" on the Capitol steps the day of the decision. People are looking for reasons to make Democratic leaders look bad. And so long as the focus is on what can Washington do, which right now is basically nothing, you feed a doom spiral amongst Democrats. When the way out of that political problem is to focus your attention on the actual Republicans currently banning abortions, the governors, the attorney generals, and the state legislatures. And there are lots of opportunities this election. And I'm not just talking about, you're not going to beat the governor of Alabama. No, but there are purple state governors, purple state AGs, purple state legislative races on the ballot, and which I name in the piece. I would focus
names.
I mean, I was kind of focusing on like actual incumbents. I mean, there are some open seat races, but like these individuals are actually your problem right now. Ron DeSantis is your problem. Brian Kemp is your problem. Greg Abbott is your problem. Attorney generals, Dave Yost in Ohio, Ken Paxton in Texas, Chris Carr in Georgia. I think I'm missing off the top of my head, but you have open seat races in Arizona. The governor, their AG are not running for re-election, but they're doing stuff in Arizona. And you have the most state legislatures are not close enough where you could plausibly flip, but they are close enough in Arizona and Michigan and Pennsylvania. Michigan and Pennsylvania have Democratic governors, but they do have Republican legislatures. And the worst case scenario would be that the Democrats lose their governor's races or lose their AG races. But so having you have a trigger an outdated law, a pre-roll law in Michigan, as well as Wisconsin, that could be resurrected if you didn't have a Democratic governor and AG unwilling to enforce it. So lots of examples here, and I even point out like there are places that are redder, like South Dakota, for example, where it's unlikely you could actually beat the existing governor or AG. But there is state by state data that the political scientists for the Washington Post compile that show these red states have pro-choice majorities. In fact, South Dakota is an interesting example because they have a 2005 trigger law, passed 2005, which now the current governor, Kristi Noem, is going to enforce. But South Dakota voters had referendums in 2006 and 2008 that defeated attempts to put abortion bans on the books. So those things happened after this trigger law passed and by a vote of the entire electorate. So again, this is, that's 14 years ago, but is it possible that the electorate, while generally conservative, doesn't want to take things that far? There's some prairie libertarianism in there. And that actually becomes the referendum on election day. And the Democrat, Kristi Noem didn't win by a big margin 4 years ago. And the Democratic nominee is like the House, I think it's the House Minority Leader. So like he's not a left wing, wackadoodle. This is someone who's won elections in South Dakota. He has a feel for the state. So I haven't seen any polling there. I don't know how much of a toll it could be, but it's the kind of thing where you might have like a lazy assumption that he's got no chance. But then you look and you say, wait a second, there are some pieces here that might make this competitive. Maybe put some energies into these places and see what happens. See if someone can gain some fresh traction here. We're not working with a whole lot of post-Dobbs data, but if you're so hung up on Washington, you might miss opportunities.
So a few points here I'd make just in response. One is I think that Biden is demonstrating his impotence by saying we should suspend the filibuster, and then he can't do it.
Right.
So he's highlighting, he may be trying to show that he's being active, but he's actually highlighting his impotence, I think. So that's a problem. I wanted to talk about the military bases, the idea to do abortions at military bases. And I have 3 points to make there. One is I think that that's the kind of thing that could spark a backlash. Obviously, it's a sense of like, hey, we had this big Supreme Court battle, and now you guys are like coming up with these, gimmicky ways to avoid following the law. I also think it would just be very damaging. Right now I think there's actually a real problem on the right where there's a sense that the military has become woke. I don't know if you've seen much of this, but there is a sense of it. Obviously, for a long, long time, people on the right and conservative folk have been very pro-military, and in fact, red states more inclined to probably serve in the military historically. There is now a sense that the military is woke, and I just think the idea of having abortions on military bases, I think, would just perpetuate that problem, which I think in the long run could be very dangerous for America. When if you had conservative people decide they're not going to support or serve in the military because it's now an institution like Disney or Goldman Sachs, or I don't even know what to throw in there. George Soros runs it, kind of thing. Like that would be very bad for this country. And then the last point I would make is how, there is an escalation theory here, right? I mean, we talked about this before, Bill. We talked about this last week about why there wasn't a backlash against the Texas bill. And you said it was because the abortion rate in Texas didn't actually decline because people were going.
Not sharply. It declined a little bit.
Because people were still able to travel to nearby states to have abortions. So,
right. And pills. Pills are huge here,
yes,
too.
But I would say that this could happen. I mean, if South Dakota, for example, could have abortions on military bases performed, then in a way, if the left is never going to get the backlash that they were hoping for, right? Because there's never going to actually be a problem.
Well, I don't think Democrats and progressives should be political about it. I don't think you should say, "Oh, I could help women get abortions, but I won't because I want the backlash." Like that's not cool. And I don't think Democrats are trying to do that. I mean,
but I'm just saying, like, realistically speaking, and look, I mean, cards on the table. I'm pro-life. We've talked about that. We're not going to debate that. But just from a purely strategic standpoint, it stands to reason that the more Democrats mitigate this, the less it's a problem, the less likely they are to benefit politically.
I mean, it creates a certain political tension, but I do think they can walk that line. I mean, I've written this in the past. I mean, I think people should, activists should fund, abortion funds that help people cross state lines and get the pills that they need. Biden is correct in saying we're going to do what we can legally to make sure people can cross state lines. I think you have to be seen and actually do, substantively what you can to help people in need. So you can't be excoriated for playing politics with people's lives. And you there's going to be plenty of examples of Republicans going in the opposite direction. They have to have some trust that, I can whip up some sentiment against places trying to not even have rape exceptions, trying to criminalize crossing state lines. And there's going to be certain places where they are going to take it too far. They are going to arrest somebody. They're going to prosecute somebody. And I can use that as an example. We have this one case that we learned about where a 10-year-old couldn't get an abortion in Ohio because she was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant, so she had to be ferried off to Indiana. Like, those stories are going to happen anyway.
Do
So
we
you don't
know?
have
I
to.
mean, do we know how she got pregnant? I mean, I know how she got pregnant, but
It's. Uh, I'm curious how.
because I hope someone goes to jail. Like, we could talk about whether she should have an abortion. I know she went to Indiana, right?
Right.
But I also never heard. No one ever said. Like, I mean, I'd like to know. Like, I hope someone is being like, was it a 12-year-old possible, or was it an adult? Likely, I don't know. But
I've yet to see a standalone story about the specific case. It was something mentioned in a broader story about the
yeah,
ramifications of the decision, and there
because
only was a few sentences about it.
the reason I ask Bill is and maybe I don't know if this is propaganda or not, but I remember, stories 15, 20 years ago where like adults bring underage people to abortion clinics to get an abortion to basically cover up abuse, right? To hide the evidence, essentially.
Yeah.
And because the abortion clinic is like no questions asked, you don't need parental consent or whatever, that they could be complicit in covering up stuff like that. So like, I just think regardless of how we feel about access to abortion, we should be prosecuting these,
Oh, well, sure. In the story, the initial story, the Ohio doctor was characterized as a child abuse doctor. So I can only presume that the girl was brought there with some understanding. We know this is an abuse. I mean, it's hard to see it any other way. Whether the male was underage or not,
yeah,
it's abuse.
My first outrage is that a 10-year-old is pregnant, and then we can get to the question of, the question at hand.
Well, to get
rape exceptions and traveling across state lines to get an abortion.
Well, I want to circle back to the electoral elements here. I don't know if people read my story and said, "Look, there's no way you're beating Greg Abbott in Texas. There's no way you're beating Ron DeSantis in Florida." And honestly, I just feel like it's premature to say that. I mean, I'm not arguing that they're going to be easy races or that Democrats are likely to win, but because we have this new factor that really hasn't been polled. I mean, there's been a couple recent Texas polls where Beto O'Rourke is down by 5 and 8, but they were taken before the decision, or at least one was fully before, one might be partially before. But I want to see some fresh data after this decision has been absorbed. Attorney general races. I mean, a governor's race is going to inevitably involve a multitude of issues and factors. Local GDP, inflation, gas prices, other controversies and such. An AG race typically doesn't get all that much attention in the first place. And in all the states that I mentioned, you have a Republican incumbent who is aggressively interpreting the Dobbs decision, going out like in Texas. Ken Paxton went to court to say, the 1925 abortion ban should be enforced right now. He doesn't have to do that, but they're going out of their way to push it. In Ohio, the AG went right to the court saying, there was an injunction on our trigger law. I want you to immediately lift this injunction, which is why the 10-year-old couldn't get the abortion, because he immediately got that injunction lifted. And the Democratic nominees, where the primaries have already occurred, are on record saying, I would not aggressively enforce this law. I would not prosecute abortion providers. I think this law is unconstitutional under the state constitution, and I'll interpret it that way. So you have very, very stark, disagreement, and therefore very likely this will be the issue, the sole issue that the AG races will turn on. If they're going to turn it, sometimes races don't turn on issues; they turn on personalities and whatnot. But it is very easily going to be the thing that the ads are going to talk about, that the media is going to talk about, the debates are going to turn on. So why not? Why not put your all into trying to make that happen? Because again, it's not like this is a state where if you make abortion the issue, you're sure to lose if you're a Democrat, because these are manifestly pro-life states. There's data to suggest the opposite. Polls show that voters don't like Georgia's abortion ban, don't like Texas' abortion ban, don't like Florida's abortion ban. So drive it, push it.
Well, how much
see
do
how far
you
you can
trust
get.
the polls, though? I mean, I think that like a 15-week ban might be very popular.
Well, what data we have in Florida says no. That's not the case. I mean, Florida's not known for being a socially conservative state, even though it has been trending Republican. It literally has a right to privacy in the state constitution. And there have been attempts by anti-abortion activists to pass statewide referendums that would override the court, because the state Supreme Court has ruled that the state right to privacy includes abortion. There were attempts to override that through referendum. They have lost. So you have not just polls, you have other evidence to suggest Floridians don't really want that. And it's not just as a 15-week ban in Florida that DeSantis signed. It's a 15-week ban with no rape or incest exception after the 15 weeks. And the poll that was done said 15-week ban, 57% don't want that. Oh, no rape exception, 62% don't want that. So if you can make that the issue, that would put you in good stead. Maybe it's hard to make it the issue because of the other issues in terms of governor.
I'm sure there are.
If you can make that...
I think in Pennsylvania, and we've talked previously about how the House is almost guaranteed to go Republican, but the Senate races are very interesting. And I do think, in Georgia, Warnock, and Pennsylvania, that the Democrats, they're already winning right now, those Senate races. So they probably don't need to do this. But I bet you, there may well be some states where why not try this tack? Why not do this?
Well, in the Senate races, Fetterman, Warnock, these are people who have already said, I would get rid of the filibuster. So
right, but I don't think that's why they're winning. In fact, they may be winning. They may be winning despite that.
Well, that may well be. What I'm saying is they're taking aggressive positions.
Yeah.
Even though they are not slam dunk states. It's the kind of thing where sometimes, like, it's like when George Bush won saying, I'm going to privatize Social Security. He wins, says, okay, if I made it to privatize Social Security, maybe you don't. Maybe it's not why you won. Maybe it didn't actually turn
definitely not
on that
why
issue.
He won. It was, he did talk about it, but it was never, I don't think people really believed he was going to do it, for one thing. And it was never the reason. In my opinion, having lived through that race as an adult, I never thought that was the reason to. It was really about 9/11, I thought, and also just John Kerry. It wasn't because we wanted to, even though I was for allowing Americans to put a portion of their retirement fund into private investment. That was never what the race was about, in my opinion. And then he wins and he's like, oh yeah, and we're going to deliver on our mandate. And I'm like, go for it. But I don't remember much about that. I know you talked about it here and there, but anyway.
When it comes to sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I hate to beat a dead horse and it's a little off topic, but I just want to say, I think that, Fetterman and Warnock are both very likable people. And Fetterman really has the look and feel, whether he is or not, just of a Joe Sixpack, and that's just so you can't buy that. If you could buy it, Mitt Romney would have bought it. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
you have it or you don't. And Fetterman has it. Warnock in a different way has it. And then they're going up against very flawed candidates too, in certain ways, in different ways. So I think that's really the key. To me, the key to those two Senate races has more to do with personality, um, and image than it does policy.
That totally could be. I mean, Fetterman Oz. I can't think of any race in memory where the Democrat, for lack of a better word, looked more macho. Oz is kind of like a wimp factor going on, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think it's like the reason why he's having a hard time, but
Well, I wouldn't underrate it. I think that the macho factor is a big deal in politics and has become a bigger deal in the last 10 years. I think it's a problem. I don't think it's a good thing, but I think, it used to be, I think it's historically been that generally the taller candidate wins for president.
So Fetterman will be king of the world at some point because he's like the biggest human alive.
Well, it's like President Camacho or whatever, right?
Right.
So yeah, I mean, but it's ridiculous, but there's something to it, and I think you're right. I mean, Fetterman, and I think it's especially effective for Fetterman because it's more. If he was a Republican, it wouldn't be as effective. I think because it's playing against type, that it's even more effective for him. So it undermines so much of the assumptions that we make or the stereotypes about kind of bleeding heart liberals.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is a tangential, but I do think we should be looking at Arizona a lot more. I mean, we haven't, in part because they haven't had their primary yet. We don't know who the nominees are going to be, and both the Republican governor and the AG are not running for reelection. The AG is running for Senate. The governor's not running for anything. But this is, a state that Joe Biden barely flipped. And Democrats recently took both Senate seats, though Mark Kelly's up for re-election this year because he won a special. And it's not known for being, again, the most socially conservative of states. Got a libertarian streak there. But you have, what's that?
I wouldn't say little. I mean, obviously Barry Goldwater's from there, but no, they've got an ornery streak. It's really weird to me. I've spent a lot of time in Phoenix, Scottsdale. In fact, I'm going to likely be there for the election. Hopefully, not doing much work
for the primary election.
Coming up in early August. I think it's the second, maybe third. Anyway,
I think
I'll probably have dinner with our friend Chuck when I'm out there. But anyway, I don't know what's in the water because I mean, man, they've got some crazy politics out there. Some of these.
Well, you have. I mean,
did you see Kari Lake going off on Brett Baer? Did you see that?
I didn't see that. No.
So
Lake is one of the gubernatorial primary candidates. Trump endorsed. Full on election conspiracy nut.
Full on Q.
And it brought this other controversy because she has gone in on the latest conservative trend being anti-drag queen, but she was friends with a drag queen when she was a Democrat years ago, and there's photos of her staying next to him, and he's gone on a tear saying, that she's betrayed him and used to be this big drag lover.
You mean like Rudy Giuliani, who literally dressed in drag with Donald, next to Donald Trump,
right? And so she's up against a more of a mainstream Chamber of Commerce type Republican, and that poll just came out where the Trump endorsed Lake is 5 points ahead. So that's has the edge, but it's not a certainty. And Trump's endorsed Blake Masters in the Senate race, and he's said some weird stuff. anti-Semitic
He's like
stuff.
a Peter Thiel funded
Yeah, he works with Thiel.
broker type hedge fund guy or something.
And he was on a podcast during the campaign where he was asked, "Who's a subversive thinker people should read?" He said Ted Kaczynski.
The Unabomber.
Right. So, and I think he was leading the most recent poll I saw, not to say by a huge margin, but sort of plausible. That's a crowded field.
Yeah.
Trump endorsement might be enough to win a third of the vote and win that nomination against Mark Kelly, who's still fairly popular. So
yeah, I think Mark Kelly also has that kind of rugged,
regular guy,
regular
guy / astronaut,
Yeah.
Regular guy who's cooler than me. And so here's a state that the Republicans really need to flip back if they want to be competitive in 2024. And they may very well may be going deeper and deeper into the fringe. And if it means losing the governor's race and losing the AG race, well, that might be a state that's not banning abortion.
Very interesting. All right, Bill, we're 46 minutes into this show. Do we stop or any other topics you want to explore this week?
I guess I'm good.
Okay. Have you seen, we talked about my TV, my movies. Have you seen anything lately for the first time?
Well, I went to a movie theater on Friday with one of my
Minions?
Kids. Minions.
Yeah. Number one at the box office.
Which the New York Times called inconsequential, which a review that I agree with. It was hardly the greatest cinematic experience of my lifetime.
I mean, how many animated movies are truly consequential? It's got to be a short list.
But there are some which I think are more. Coco is more impactful to me than Minions. But she had a good time, and it is nice to be in a theater. Although it's always a little weird now. You buy it ahead of time and you reserve your seat. Like, it feels a little more bougie than it was. Like you toughed it out when you were a kid. You stood on the line and you hunted for your seat in the dark. But nevertheless, you know what I think, Matt. This just made me thinking about watching movies with my kids. They don't laugh out loud a lot. I don't know if your kids will laugh out loud when you watch funny movies with them.
Every once in a while, and I tell you, there's nothing better. It's usually my little guy. He's 9 now, but there's nothing more authentic, right? Than who was it? Who was it that said that there's a famous line that someone said that that like a child's laugh is the only authentic thing because after the first time it's just performance or something like that. I forget the quote, but like a good guffaw from a child is priceless. So good.
I suspect a lot of kids today, maybe more like older kids, don't laugh out loud at movies and shows as much because they don't have the experience of going to the movies and watching a comedy in a group and having that contagious laughter experience that is so foreign to people. That's why I don't know. Like I remember like there's that stretch in the 90s when you're like there's something about Mary and American Pie and Me, Myself, and Irene, and things that just had like these gut busting belly laugh moments in it. But if you watched it on TV, you wouldn't have the same reaction to it.
I wonder if it's the communal nature or if it's, when you're in the movies, unless some idiot's on their iPhone in front of you, which happens too often now, it's huge screen, you're completely focused on it and it envelops you. And I wonder if it's that, or if it's the communal nature of sharing.
Well, I think it's both. It demands your focus.
I like going to a movie theater. I think that is an experience which I do not think, I don't care how big your TV is or how great the surround sound is, there's something special about it. So go to the movies, everybody. Go see Minions. Go see Maverick. And we'll see you back here next week.
At the movies.
Yeah, here. Thumbs up from me. Bill, always a pleasure. And follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Read Bill's stuff at Washington Monthly.
And Real Clear Politics.
Real Clear Politics. And check me out at the Daily Beast. And see you next week.
All right. Take care.